There was a lot of good that happened in gaming in 2016. Whether it be old franchises finding their way into the modern day age, or indie darlings coming out of nowhere to deliver some fantastic experiences, 2016 was a good year. Hell, when I compare my reviews in 2015 to 2016, there seems to be a lot more quality that came out this year than in years past. But of course, 2016 had its share of disappointments. Things that not only made me want to Picard facepalm, but made me question how certain companies were going to survive the upcoming months. This list highlights some of the things that really dropped the ball this year, and this is coming from somebody who is innately critical at heart. I don't get hyped for things. Except Danganronpa 3. All the hype in the world for that game. Now, I want to make this clear. This list isn't the top 10 disappointing games of 2016. In fact, no one point on this list is a singular game. That would be too easy in my opinion, and in a weird way, I don't put the fault on the games themselves. Now, certain companies and the games they produce will find their way on the list, as well as general trends that hopefully will die sooner rather than later. But enough of an intro. These are my personal disappointments surrounding gaming in 2016. Number 10. The Game Awards 2016. Remember how people had hope for these awards? When it would truly highlight the best that games had to offer? That it would be a celebration of games? God, that was foolish. The thing is, I feel for Jeff. I do think he started these awards with the intention of doing a lot of good for the industry. And look, I know award shows like this cost money to produce. So you know what? I have no problems with some advertisements appearing during the proceedings. But when your show feels like one big advertisement that outshadows the awards that are actually being delivered, you know that something has gone horribly, horribly wrong. I mean, how many of the awards that were voted on actually were highlighted in their own segments and not mentioned in passing while we got to the next trailer? Hell, one award wasn't even mentioned thanks to legal issues surrounding it. My biggest disappointment around the awards, however, has to be with Jeff and what he said about what was going to happen in the 2016 version of the awards. In an interview with Polygon, Jeff said, "I had thought about the story of No Man's Sky a lot. Did we create this black hole of hype that the developers couldn't pull themselves out of? Some of that was authored by me. There is a good moral of the story, and it's part of what I'm trying to address this year. To have developers be more transparent about the state of their game." It was clarified later on that he wanted more in-game footage and less CGI-like trailers, which would be a great step to deal with that out-of-control hype train. However, can I just show you a couple of trailer segments of what was shown during the show?
What happened down there? Isabel?
5 months ago, the portal from the Ark to Earth shut down without warning.
Right. Now, I don't think Jeff Keighley didn't mean what he said there. I honestly think the guy wanted to fix that, and probably got screwed by the big companies threatening to pull out of the award show. But don't promise something that you can't deliver on, especially when you're a veteran of this industry and know full well what these companies will do. I could go on about the unrelated music performances and the Schick Hydrobot, but the Game Awards only makes number 10 on this list due to still having some good moments, such as that Dragon Cancer's developer and his wonderful speech, and Hideo Kojima last year and the revelations that came out of him. Those were still good for the industry, but if this is supposed to celebrate gaming, it's really doing a poor job at it. Also, one last obligatory shot at MatPat.
That dragon cancer!
Number 9. Crytek. Now this one's a lot more recent, but this one also hits close to home. Personal story, I've got a degree in software engineering, and I know the pains of programming and everything involved in it. I worked for a big corporation that never gave two shits about its employees and the sub-companies under them. Hell, one of the big reasons I left the company was a HIPAA violation they had, questioning my work ethic after I went to a doctor's appointment, which I had scheduled late at night during normal off hours. So needless to say, I'm not exactly a fan of company tomfoolery. But you know what I can't comprehend, even with a company such as that? How it could fail to pay their employees for several months. And with Crytek, this isn't the first time it's happened. I'll link to appropriate articles in the description below regarding this, because guess what? I'm not the know, and actually cite my sources correctly. I'm taking a lot of shots at YouTubers in this top 10 list. Wonder if that'll be a point later on. Now, it's a shit situation all around. Apparently the main office hasn't received checks in nearly 3 months, and regardless how dastardly some corporations can be, it usually doesn't go that far. And let's face it, Crytek hasn't exactly been the once prestigious company that it used to be. Warface may be okay, but Rise critically and economically bombed. And with VR not taking off, games like Back to Dinosaur Island isn't exactly going to save them, now is it? However, why it earns a spot on this list is the fact that they apparently didn't see this coming. When you get into financial troubles like they did originally, maybe they should have taken some more action at the time, like maybe reforming or closing the 6 different studios that they just recently closed. You do everything in your power to make sure something like not paying your workers never happens again. Now, this is the lowest company on the list because, well, it's hard to disappoint when the expectations are so low. The Crytek engine was a feat of technology at the time it came out, but ask gamers nowadays what Crytek's last game was, and they probably tell you Crysis. You know, one of the oldest franchises in their library that last was relevant in 2013. But from a sheer this can't happen again standpoint, Crytek makes the list, because you pay people. End of discussion. Number 8. PC launches continue to come up short. Now, I'm going to give 2016 a little bit of credit here, because it actually improved in this area. With that said, it doesn't say much when Batman Arkham Knight, one of the worst PC ports ever created, was in 2015. But 2016 still saw a continuations of games that hit both the consoles and the PC platforms fail to live up to expectations in the performance area, especially on PC. Now granted, there's a lot of different hardware configurations out there, and I don't expect indie gaming companies to have the resources to put the software through the hardware ringer. With that said, when a AAA game comes out and has issues, well, that's a bigger problem now, isn't it? And it was all over the spectrum with a lot of the major publishers. 2K Games and Mafia 3 launched with a 30 FPS lock along with a bunch of crashing issues. Bethesda and Dishonored 2 launched with low frame rates in open areas, as well as motion sickness-like effects with some of the graphical options. And No Man's Sky? Well, that may have been one of the worst, with massive hitching and frame issues all over the place. But even games like XCOM 2 showed a bit of problems, as sound driver issues caused some players to not hear anything, and a memory leak would use enormous amounts of RAM at times. The Windows Store didn't help things, as games like Quantum Break didn't have simple things like quitting from the main menu on top of its performance issues. Hell, even Deus Ex Mankind Divided had mouse acceleration issues on top of some pretty beefy load times. Now, there were some bright spots in the Doom and Battlefield 1 PC versions of the game, which ran pretty much like a dream. But overall, the PC still feels like the secondary player in the video game platform market to companies, despite the fact that this year, it seemingly made more money. Hopefully in 2017, we see more things like Watch Dogs 2, which delayed the PC version of the game and it was pretty good on launch. I think people are willing to accept waiting a tiny bit for good performance, and hopefully that trend continues. Number 7. Capcom. Look, a lot of people may say I'm biased with this one. I'm a huge Mega Man fan, and they've basically killed the Blue Bomber. I hated Resident Evil Revelations 2, thinking it's some of the worst game design and execution I've seen in the entire series. A series that had Resident Evil 6 force a complete revamp of the franchise. So I may not be the most objective person when it comes to this company. But okay, let's go through what games that Capcom released in 2016 and look at them objectively as we can. Street Fighter V updated the classic franchise with a new look and what seems to be a really deep fighter, and the base gameplay is wonderful. The problem? How it released. Without mainstays of the series like a story mode or training modes at that point, people didn't really want to pay for a piecemeal experience. For being the supposed fighting game of 2016, as awarded by the Games Awards no less, its casual appeal dropped off the face of the map, and it's clear it put the esports scene ahead of everything else. But there's other problems such as how they handled rage quitting on ladder, aka they didn't at first, as well as how long they took to address some of the issues the community was having. Things they had to know about going into the development of the game, because well, they made Street Fighter 4. One of the most irritating things that a developer can do in my mind is not learn from the mistakes of their past, and Capcom is one of the worst companies when it comes to that. Their constant indicating of updates and missing deadlines and not correcting themselves just is proof of that. Hell, I'd make a Voss joke here, but really, it's just sad. But okay, at least Street Fighter V was still relatively well received for its gameplay and its combat. Dead Rising 4, on the other hand, tried to reinvent the series by removing the traditional psychopaths that actually made the series what it was, as well as its iconic timer. Yes, I know, it only got 4 points less than Street Fighter V on Metacritic, and that's why Metacritic isn't a good indicator, because, well, read some of the reviews in that score. You'll understand why. Here's the place I plug OpenCritic, because you can follow reviewers that give you the information you need and is a much better service in the end. While some say that the features didn't define the series, its new direction seemed to have a lot of problems and made the game feel bland. As Alex Santamaria over at TechRaptor put it, the developers of Dead Rising 4 instead doubled down on the worst elements of Dead Rising 3 and piled more excess on top. You should read his review. It's available in the description below. And then there's Umbrella Corps. Despite what Sam from TechRaptor says in his review, I'm just gonna let a couple of clips from various famous YouTubers make the point about Umbrella Corps.
Dear gaming lords, why have you forsaken us?
And so I'm gonna give this guy my 1 out of 10. Seriously, fuck this guy.
But does Capcom give a shit? Nope. They released it anyway to make up for the time and resources they spent developing this shit turd when it should have been canceled far before release.
What saves Capcom from being higher on this list is that Ace Attorney 6 did release to good reviews, one game that I actually still want to play, so it's not a horrible year. And they did remake the original Resident Evil 0 fantastically earlier this year, so they've got some shining spots among the shit they've created. But for one of the biggest publishers in the industry, Capcom didn't really have a lot to show for it in 2016. Number 6. Comcept. Sort of fitting that it follows up Capcom on this list, eh, Inafune? Okay, it would just be easy for me to say Mighty Number 9 and then move on in this list. And this really pains me as a Mega Man fan, as I wanted the game to succeed more than any other game this year. I want the Mega Man style gameplay to have a resurgence. Hell, playing the Mega Man collection again, it still holds up. Which, by the way, Capcom, give me a Mega Man X collection and your sins are forgiven forever. And you know what? I hadn't played the game when I started this list, so I bought the game and actually tried it. And yeah, it deserves the reviews it got. The controls are awkward, the gameplay has a lot of flow issues, and well, it looks a lot different than the original prototype did, now doesn't it? Now, several of the game's production problems have been highlighted by others, and it shows. I mean, the game got more delays than an airport with Adam Salil in it, so you would have hoped that some of the technical problems here would have been hashed out by the time it was released. But nope, it was still bad. Its launch was a disaster, as the Steam code mix-up that occurred was inexcusable, and the Wii U version was busted. Mega busted. Now I'll leave a moment of silence here for you to audibly groan at that last joke. And while the marketing may have been more deep silver than Comcept, the anime fan on prom night line may be one of the most insulting lines I've seen in the history of trailers. It's hilarious on retrospect, but seriously, how does this get approved in a modern day society that will throw up their arms as a supposed sexy pose and say they're horribly insulted? How? Oh, but by the way, I also learned that they were part of the development of Recore apparently. You learn something new every day. Now, it did fare a bit better than Mighty No. 9, but not by much actually. And again, we see a lot of problems in the gameplay of Recore. It had issues with repetitive quests, dungeons being too formulaic, and loading times that lasted up to 4 minutes in some cases. That has been patched, but that's freaking inexcusable on the launch of a game. Concept's company name is sort of fitting when I think about it. Very similar to the word concept. It's got a lot of ideas, a lot of visions when it comes to design and the evolution of certain gameplay elements. I think Mighty No. 9 may have worked in a different set of levels and tweaks to enemies. But here's the thing, Concept can't execute their vision worth a damn. And sadly, execution means a lot in the gaming world. Number 5, the lack of disclosure surrounding gaming videos. This channel started for a variety of reasons. I wanted to highlight smaller games that were overlooked, but there were other reasons as well. I wanted to do things right. In my mind, I saw too many people not properly disclosing review copies, not properly disclosing brand deals. I foolishly hoped that setting an example for those channels would show that, hey, you can do things right and still succeed. And there are good examples of proper disclosure by several YouTubers out there. So there is still hope. Of course, hopes mean nothing in this world, especially when it comes to the YouTube world. There is only despair. Yes, I love the Danganronpa series, what of it? You only need to mention 2 names to understand how badly things got with disclosure this year. T. Martin and Pro Syndicate, the CSGO Lotto scandal. Oh, by the way, I have partial ownership in this site that I'm promoting like it's not any big deal. Oh, we've been caught? Let me create a video that attempts to emotionally manipulate the viewer by using man's best friend. People talk about the cancer of YouTube, and rest assured, T. Martin and Pro Syndicate are not only the cancer of YouTube, they are the black plague of YouTube. They are only some examples of some of the worst liars, manipulators, and downright ugly personalities that exist in today's world. And sadly, they enjoy a reasonable amount of success despite that. See, beyond the CSGO Lotto scandal, Pro Syndicate is still breaking several FTC guidelines with several of his videos, such as his Dead Realm videos. So here's the disclosure for him. He worked as a part of the company that made the game. He benefits from its sales directly. Now he claims it's public knowledge, but based on FTC guidelines, he has to say it every video, and he does not. Now I understand. The ever-evolving guidelines means that some of those videos can't be fully fixed without taking down the actual video. But you know what you could do? Take steps to fix part of the problem, like adding the proper disclosure to old videos at the top of its description. Hell, he's seen direct examples of his fuck-ups and responded to it on Twitter. Has he done anything about it? Of course he hasn't, that's why it's in the list. But here's the real kicker. Has T. Martin or Pro Syndicate really been hurt or had anything done to them by the various companies that work with them, YouTube, or even the FTC themselves? No. The big lawsuit that they were named in was thrown out of court as the lawyers didn't exactly do a great job of presenting the evidence that was out there. Companies like Scuff Controllers and Astro Headsets still work with people like T. Martin regardless of his practices, and even companies like Razer still have no problem with proven liars being spokesmen for their brands. If the gaming community really wants unbiased coverage, and sometimes I truly wonder if they do, then they really need to go harder after cancer like these creators. Show them that no, they can't get away with it. The only reason this point is not number 1 on this list is that it's an issue that's not unique to gaming. It's all over YouTube and the news world right now. It's just, for someone like me who's tried to make gaming his life, it sorta stands out. Number 4. It's for your own good mentality. Let me be frank that this covers 2 major topics in this one point, but they both have one key element in common: the changing or censoring of content due to concerns of outrage or rating systems that really haven't evolved with the times. First off, I recognize that sometimes content does need to be changed to make the content a little more accessible to certain players out there, and that can be done in a good way. However, localization has gone a little bit too far in several cases this year. As well, just look at some of the videos created by Censored Gaming to see some examples. Sure, some of the changes are forced thanks to trying to make a certain rating in the current ESRB system, but some of them legitimately don't make a hell of a lot of sense when it comes down to it. Take for example the whole situation with Fire Emblem Fates and a whole sub-story of dialogue being reduced to dots. Okay, ninjas are silent, I get that, but you're destroying character moments in the process. Or hell, how about the whole pickle situation with one of the characters? Now, there's multiple ways for a company to localize, but when you completely negate subplots from the original work, I think you go too far. And Treehouse went way too far in this case. Dead or Alive Extreme Volleyball 3 had to be imported due to stores not wanting to carry it due to the controversy and the outrage of people had over the game. Now, is the Dead or Alive Extreme Volleyball series one that I'd rush and pick up? No. Do I think there's a lot better games out there with vixens such as Kasumi? Yes. Do I think it had a right to be sold in stores? Yes. But even beyond that, one particular example needs to be pointed out that really takes this to the nth degree: The Binding of Isaac. A fantastic game, a wonderful game, and a game apparently too violent for the iOS store because it's violent against children. You know, a game where tears kill enemies in a cartoon-like world is too violent against children. Now, did it eventually get approved for the Apple Store? Yes, it did. But when some of the reports originally came out of its rejection on February 7th, 2016, and it takes all the way to October for it to get approved, something is wrong there. What's hilarious about this is that of all companies, Nintendo had a change of heart on the game in question, and this is a company that is the most kid-friendly of all the major publishers. But due to the strict guidelines that Apple has, a fantastic game can't make its way to mobile devices because of a stigma. Although, to be fair, if it did make its way to mobile devices, it may kill the productivity of gamers everywhere. I mean, that game's really addictive, so maybe there's some hidden reasoning there. Number 3. Hello Games and Sony. You knew that this was going to be on the list. Hell, most of these lists will have No Man's Sky as the biggest disappointment of this year. And hell, maybe if I was actually semi-interested in the game on launch, my list would have mirrored others. But frankly, I saw a game that promised a hell of a lot without a lot to back it up. It showed me all the signs that it was going to be a flop: limited pre-release footage, a general lack of definition of what the game did well, and an overall feeling that the game was a bit too big for its britches. But despite the game failing to meet all that it said it was capable of doing, that's not why it made this list. Sure, being able to see your counterparts in space and not actually being able to do that, okay, that's a huge problem, and it really was false advertising. However, I don't doubt that Hello Games had every intention of trying to pull off that explained world. I wish they went about things differently in the footage they presented, of course, and I would have locked up Sean Murray up in a closet before he said something even more stupid in the public eye at the time. I saw a team guy in Murray who really thought he could deliver a wondrous world, and I think they really believed in their project. They didn't just sell a concept to people. They just failed to pull it off in the end, and I'd rather have a team reach for the stars than to flounder around personally. So why is it on the list? It's what happened after it launched. The radio silence. When there were questions coming left and right, Hello Games went into hibernation and didn't answer any of them. They may have been working on things related to the game, of course, but that's where they made their brutal mistake. Part of being a company is communication with your client base, and my god, Hello Games failed that more than I did at Stranger of Sword City. And that's saying something. And what's worse is that despite being told that, it was followed up with the incident regarding the supposed hacking of the Hello Games Twitter account, which just made things worse, because it was very apparent that Hello Games was paying attention, but refused to talk to people. Now, that could have been for a variety of reasons. Maybe they weren't ready for the negativity of the responses, maybe they were scared. But you have to do it as a professional company. And even to this day, Hello Games has failed in the communication department over and over and over again, despite promises to fix that issue. But I also put a lot of the blame on Sony, regardless of what their status was as a partner to Hello Games. This was one of the biggest indie games that a AAA publisher had helped to support. They should have seen what was going on and jumped in to help the Hello Games team, in particular with their communication woes. You can say that it wasn't their job, but here's the thing about business. You do jobs that you aren't paid to do to see a project succeed. And I guess in Sony's eyes, it did succeed because, well, it made a bunch of money. But unlike other studios that they partnered with, they aren't going to be able to do it again with Hello Games. There's too much distrust at this point. Hello Games is the ultimate sign of being careful of what you say in public, and to not let the hype train get out of control regardless of your intentions. It can come back to bite you in the ass in the end, and that bite will sting for a long time. Number 2. Bethesda's review copy decision. I won't claim objectivity on this one. This channel is based on reviews, and frankly, I don't really care about the free copy portion of review copies. Hell, they are tax deductible if you purchase a game, and part of what you have to do if you are going to review some of the biggest games out there. It's more of the early access and the ability for reviewers to get information to the general public on the launch of a game. And while I'm nowhere near big enough to get review copies from the behemoth of the industry, the power play made by Bethesda severely disappointed me. But not only that, some of the positive reception from the gaming audience to this decision also really bothered me. When I see people complain about companies misleading people with things like No Man's Sky, the fact that a significant amount of people celebrated this just really puts me off. Because rest assured, this is a bad thing for the gaming industry. I understand that certain people don't like Polygon, don't like Kotaku, and think they don't deserve review copies. Okay, fine. But even if you think they are evil, this move is a bad as a whole for everyone. Because those legitimate reviewers who try to give you information about the state of a game are now hurt by this policy. And while you can say that people should wait for information before making a purchase, we all know how that really turns out in the end. Case in point, No Man's Sky, which was a huge financial success despite it being a massive disappointment in the eyes of the gaming world. But this is specifically about Bethesda, and well, they've been caught with their hands in the cookie jar. We've seen it with Dishonored 2 and the issues it had with the PC launch with its performance. We saw it with Skyrim Enhanced Edition and the inferior sound quality it had on launch. Bethesda pointed to Doom and justified their actions with that game's release, but Doom was the exception to the rule. For every game like Doom that didn't have review copies that received universal praise, you've got 3 that didn't, such as Assassin's Creed Unity, Batman Arkham Knight, and Sonic Boom. What truly bothered me in the end was their justification. Look, if you're straight up with me, I really don't care if you tell me that you're going to screw me over in particular. At least you said it to my face, and to an extent, I appreciate your brutal honesty. Hell, that may make me more willing to pick your game up, because if you're honest with me in that case, I'm more willing to believe that you put your heart and soul into the game. But if you try to mislead me and give reasons that sound good on paper but are easy to disprove, well, I'm sorry, you're going to get my wrath. Bethesda said they wanted everyone to experience the game at once. I mean, it's a noble thought. It's for the fans. No spoilers. Everyone can talk about it at the water cooler. Make their own reviews. People who say they want to wait for the reviews can still wait. But those who don't want to be accidentally running into something that may hurt their enjoyment of the game would be saved. Praise Bethesda. They are really looking out for gamers. Wait, what's that? Instead of review copies, there were influencer copies given out to specific members of the YouTube community that weren't traditionally critical? Like fans or people who created more comedy content than more critically based reviews? Gee, Bethesda, that seems to go against everything you said publicly. They experienced the game before everyone else. It's almost like the reasoning was actually about controlling the coverage of the game. Would you imagine that? I hope this doesn't set a precedent for other big companies to pull this kind of shit. Because God knows, it may. This is an industry that loves to play the copycat. If it does, I see qualities of games on launch doing a nosedive. Now look, those influencers do a hell of a lot to overshadow certain elements of the game, but they still have a place in the industry, alongside more critical reviewers. Number 1. Game releases segmenting or missing content. I want to be clear from the get-go here. I'm not talking about early access games or episodic games. While yes, early access games that failed to deliver still need to be highlighted, at least you sorta know in those situations, however, what you're getting into. Hell, I actually think that this year showed a way to piecemeal content in a reasonable way in the Hitman series. You can wait until the game comes out entirely, or you can get some elements right away. I think for the finances and everything like that, that could be the future of where gaming is heading. But no, these are the games that released at full price with a significant chunk of the experience missing, and still had the gall to advertise the game as a complete experience on launch. There's one big game that obviously comes to mind with this mentality, and that's No Man's Sky. But the bad promises of Sean Murray aside, he was not the only one involved in practices like these. Some of them are easily proven, others not so much, as it's hard to see where DLC starts and where DLC ends. But it's become ever so clear that when it comes to content in the modern day gaming horizon, that some companies will rip chunks out of a game for more monetization purposes. To show an example where things aren't cut and dry, but seem to have the signs that content was cut out, I go to one of my favorite games of 2016, as you'll find out tomorrow, Final Fantasy XV. Specifically, there are subplots in the game that are rather interesting, such as Gladio having to leave the party in the middle of the game and coming back with a rather nice scar across his face. What happens is never really mentioned in the game, and it seems to be significant, as Gladio's attitude after coming back seems to have changed reasonably. That indicates that maybe he underwent some reasonable character growth during that period. So it's a subplot that just doesn't get resolved, right? Well, that seems to be true until you notice the season pass, and you find out that one of the first episodes of the DLC has to deal with Gladio and what happened during this time that he was gone. Yes, it fills in the plot of the game for anyone who bought the season pass, and anyone who just bought the regular game are sorta missing out. Where my big problem lies here is that I think DLC is a good way of extending a game's life, as long as it doesn't come at the cost of the main game. Let's take for example something that could have worked for DLC for Final Fantasy XV, like a side story about Core and what he does when he leaves the group to go and take down an Imperial base. You don't get a lot about Core after this point in the story, but a DLC here would help fill the gap that takes the story in a different direction, but doesn't directly impact the story you're telling right now. Here's the problem. The plot holes that the game seemingly has may be fixed by this DLC, but the ramifications of that DLC is already shown in the plot. You see the changes in characters that seem abrupt now, but with that content coming back, it makes a lot more sense. Like it was there before. Hell, let's take this concept a step further and hold off content entirely unless you buy another game of a company's that really is only tangentially related to it. You know what situation I'm hinting at here. Modern Warfare Remastered being walled off to only people who bought the Legacy Edition of Infinite Warfare. Now, to be fair to Activision, at least they didn't price the game more than the normal $60 price tag. But to take a remastered version and wall it off to people who want only it, just for the sake of selling Infinite Warfare, it's scummy. It's crap. There is numerous examples of this happening this year in not only the AAA industry, but down to smaller games that I wouldn't have expected to pull something like this. This needs to stop. If the cost of your game is not enough to make back your original investment, then consider either reducing its scope or clearly segment the content like Hitman did. In my mind, it's the biggest growing problem that I've noticed in the industry since starting this channel 2 years ago. And if nothing is done about it, it's only going to get worse. I would love to say hold off on purchasing games with anyone doing practices like these, but I know that's not going to really register. People want fun games and are willing to risk disappointment for an exciting time. But to those devs and publishers out there, please for the love of God stop this. Sooner or later, this will come back and bite you in the ass. It may not be for a while, but please don't go down this path. That's it for this list. What things in gaming disappointed you this year? Tell me how No Man's Sky was the spawn of Satan in the comments section below. And coming up is my Games of the Year, which will probably release on January 1st, 2017. Anyway, I'll see ya all later, and as always, keep on gaming.